smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, though sometimes my bow ties are a little frayed and sometimes they don't sit quite right. They are nonetheless my getup, my attire, my costume for coming on the show here to talk with you every day at 1 o'clock. I'm really glad that you are giving me just a couple minutes every time. I think that's all I really need to give you the best insight that I would say God in His providence wants you to have from me if I have anything valuable to offer. Now, we argue that near is better than far, small than big, and simple than complex. And in the footnotes at 5-point type, there is supporting arguments. I always say don't make arguments in 5s or 15s or 40s. I've read arguments that have 30 parts and 15 parts, and they are unwieldy and really impossible and highly unattractive. Threes are what a Trinitarian would propose as an argument, 3 parts, and then all other arguments are really supporting the main points in some way or other. I've got 2 supporting points, lesser points perhaps. Personal is better than corporate, and physical is better than abstract. And the number to get on the show is 800-8949, 800-8949. Maybe you have a problem. Maybe you have some news. Maybe there's something I really need to hear from you about that's important and significant. There's a story at Nougat.com this morning by Chloe Morris, the editor from Inc.com, and she had made the effort of calling several of the local winners of the 5,000 private companies growing the most quickly. There are several here in Chattanooga, which is a city rich in the logistics trade. And I hope we can learn a little bit more about that today. 800 is the number, 800-8949. Dick Cook, who runs East Ridge News Online, has a story about the city council in East Ridge approving $100,000 for the city's SWAT team. And apparently there's body armor being worn by these men and women 15 years old. I believe I've read that perspiration and heat reduces the bullet stopping capacity of body armor after a really short time. The story mentions 5 years. J.R. Reed says that he is ordering 12 state-of-the-art tactical vests and 12 lightweight helmets and 13 rifles with accessories from GT Distributors that's here in town. And the tab is $107,000, and the money is going to come from the city's rainy day fund. And the story mentions the International Brotherhood of Police Officers, a local. It's a union, and I'm not sure if it's an actual union or if it just pretends to be a union. A real union has the authority of its members to negotiate on their behalf for pay and so on. And I'm not sure that this group has that function, or was given that function, or is a real union. But it does have that idea of united together in the same field of business, the policing business. And the council, by the way, according to Dick Cook, also approved 2 SUVs for $62,000 for the ERPD, East Ridge Police Department's Crime Suppression Unit, the CSU, we're told here. And it is something akin to undercover officers. We're going to use vehicles that the department has seized. That plan fell through, Dick reports. So the story is this military equipment and military gear. And I'm wanting you to drop in, by the way, to Nouganomics.com, the website for the man and the woman who matter. And that is because it looks at the actual existing deep state. We do have a deep state in Tennessee, and the word I use for it is called commercial government. And there we look at how this system works. And I borrow heavily from theological work and from Christian analyses. I don't really reproduce a lot of biblical material, but the Christian Reconstructionists, as the sect in Christianity that seems to be the most useful, it is part of the Reformed Church, and the Reconstructionists led by the late R.J. Rushdoony, and with several notable writers. Gary North is perhaps the leading light alive still. He's in his 80s and is a remarkably prolific writer and author. They are the ones who've really kind of informed my analysis, and I rely heavily on the Reform perspective. The Reform perspective in Christianity holds to, I guess, the main concept is the sovereignty of God, the sovereignty and providence of God. Other Christian other Christian fields or other parts of Christianity have a much lower view of the sovereignty of God and a very low view of the law of God. They say, well, we live in an age of grace, and we are involved in a continuing retreat from culture, a retreat from the arts, from lawmaking, from government, from everything, from technology to science. We have retreated from these areas because, well, we're waiting for the rapture, and God really doesn't want us to be relevant because we're not here to save culture. We're not here to save any city, just individuals. So there's a kind of an individualization, a hyper-individualization of Christianity and Christian ethics, not a larger view that God cares about cities. He cares about government. He cares about science and education and the family and economics and everything else. We have in Christianity this split. And the dominant report in Chattanooga is, of course, the losing side. That is to say, the side of retreat and irrelevance. We can't possibly care about the cash bail program in local economy. That's the skimming economy that keeps people poor, makes a profit off of pain, as the protesters have been saying. Well, we can't take an interest in that because it's not about our personal piety and our personal private Christian lives. If you go to neweconomics.com, you can see my post today. It's an essay by John Whitehead, the constitutional attorney, and he is saying that we are facing a lockdown future. And I mentioned this in light of the East Ridge up-arming, right? East Ridge is up-arming. Well, we're not at war. We are not. We're not facing a terrorist threat. And yet police departments and sheriff's departments all around the country are preparing for the kinds of things that Charlottesville had just Saturday, which was a mass lockdown of the city, which voids all constitutional rights. When you have a sheltering in place kind of circumstance, which remember from the Olympic race bombing in Boston, and then 3 years ago in Baltimore, 4 years ago in Ferguson, Missouri. These are 2013 Boston Marathon. It was not Olympics. It was the marathon. There was a seizure of the rights of everybody. Everybody was subject to search in a mass way without individualization or individuation of the necessity for probable cause. Everybody is a victim. Everybody is a suspect, and everybody will be searched. Everybody's house will be searched without there being a particular affirmation by a judge and a sworn statement that your house is where we think our Tsarnaev is, our suspect is, and we're going to search your house because we think you're hiding him. None of that. It was a mass system. Tess Owens is writing in Vice, and residents waking up Saturday, all entrances to the downtown mall were blocked off, apart from 2 checkpoints where police looked through people's bags for lighters, knives, or any other weapons. A lighter is a weapon. Up above, standing atop a building site, 2 National Guard members photographed the individuals coming in and out. A National Guard encampment was set up at McGuffey Park between the children's playground and the basketball court, where about 20 military police officers in camouflage were snoozing in the shade of some trees. A similar encampment was set up a few blocks away. Downtown Charlottesville, according to Ned Oliver, another journalist, felt like the green zone of a war-torn city. Again, that was Saturday. More than 1,000 local and state police officers barricaded 10 blocks of the city's popular pedestrian district, the downtown mall, to prepare for this one-year anniversary protest of the white supremacist rally that as you remember, 2017 left several people, dozen people injured and 1 person killed. To enter, people had to submit to bag checks and searches at one of the 2 checkpoints. Preparations aside, unlike last year, no white supremacist groups had said they were going to visit the city. And by week's end, none had. Okay, there's your threat, right? Instead, it was a normal day on the mall, except for the heavy security, a military helicopter constantly circling overhead, and hundreds of police officers milling around. What is this about? Why do these things happen? Well, they are training for the future, the bleak future that some in the military and police state want to have. They find their comfort and security in the reduction of the prospect of resistance to that. This is a militarized exercise in intimidation of the people of Charlottesville. And John Whitehead says it worked only too well. This is the home of Thomas Jefferson. I lived there for 4 years. The nation's third president, author of the Declaration of Independence, and the champion, as he is reminding you, my reader at Nuganomics.com, the champion of the Bill of Rights. The number is 800-8949. Call me 800-8949, 800-8949. The idea of sheltering in place is from George Orwell. Not really, but it is a kind of phrase that if he'd thought in our vein, in our time, he might have come up with. Military style helicopters equipped with thermal imaging devices, buzzing the skies, tanks and armored vehicles in the streets, snipers perched on rooftops, thousands of black garb police swarming the streets, and SWAT teams carrying out house-to-house searches. Well, that's what happened in Boston at the marathon bombing scenario, and these things happen particularly, and the owners and managers of the police state will use these occasions. They will use pretended threats or real threats to have exercises of this kind. We haven't had one here, but when it happens, I'm wondering who's going to say no. If there's a test trial where we take part of downtown and we say we're going to search every building, every house in Highland Park. We're going to search every house in Highland Park because we're having a threat. We have a threat, a credible threat that we have to find someone, and we don't know where this person is. And so what we have in these kind of acclimatizations, right? These efforts to acclimatize, make people familiar with this climate, are these examples. And of course, these examples are closely studied, not by the press. I don't think the press has really looked carefully at these. I've seen very few stories that look at the whole, that really give a proper treatment of how abusive they are, right? And journalists are supposed to be, journalists by and large are very respectful of officials, right? When officials are doing something, the journalist says, well, that must be true. If we're members of the press, should not we be asking the bad questions? Should not we be asking the wrong questions? Glenn Greenwald says that we're so accustomed to seeing police officers decked in camouflage and RoboCop-style costumes, riding in armored vehicles and carrying automatic weapons, first introduced during the U.S. occupation of Baghdad, that it has become normalized, he says. The dangers of domestic militarization are both numerous and manifest. East Ridge. To begin with, it degrades the mentality. Now, this is important. It degrades the mentality of police forces in virtually every negative way, with subjects their targeted communities to rampant brutality and unaccountable abuse. And East Ridge is looking to join in the party as necessary, right? It's only if it's necessary. Police militarization also poses grave and direct dangers to basic political liberties, including rights to free speech, press, and assembly. Do you think that a guy like me is going to be able to avoid arrest doing my job? Well, I do my job, okay? And so it looks like I'm going to be cut short if this happens here doing my job. So make note. Militarized police, riot squads, camouflage gear, black uniforms, mass arrests, pepper spray, tear gas, batons, strip searches, surveillance cameras, Kevlar vests. This is the nomenclature of modern security. And guess what? And when I was downtown the other day, I was seeing police cars at every parking meter, and it just hit me that in every police state, it's always the same. No police state is really any different from any other, whether it's Marxist, National Socialist, maybe from a dictatorship in some impoverished African country with a king with a gold-plated throne. They're all the same. They have all the same smells. They have the same protocols, and they have this sort of anonymous terror power. It's all stripping away our freedom, right? Less than lethal weapons. We think of the taser used in a Mideastern terror event, which was in Chatsworth on Friday. A woman, a Syrian immigrant woman, 87 years old, was out in a field near her house, Martha al-Bishara. And clearly it was a terrorist event because Chief Josh Etheridge approached her, rushed toward her, thinking the worst, right, with two other officers, and they tased her. They didn't even have the courage that a Crips member would have had, would have been come up to her and knock her down, right? That's what a Crips member would have done in a manful way. The Chatsworth police in this terror incident shot her with a taser from about 15 or 20 feet, double prong electrical charge. And the test for liberty is not that these things aren't happening now. That we're not concerned about them not happening now. What matters is when there's a test of liberty, a test of restraint. Okay, so maybe there's a robber who shot somebody and he's on the loose. Are we going to arrest everybody we see? Are we gonna knock people down because they're not doing what we say at the spur of the moment? Is that what we're going to do? The test is when the threat is there. There's not a test now. There's not a test now. The real trial for these agencies and for you, my listener, who will be needing to assert your liberty at this point, is when there's a crisis, a pretended necessity, a pretended high state interest in total control, a total police presence, a total lockdown. When that happens, that's when you, my listener, have to assert your rights. Or you're going to be like the people mentioned in John Whitehead's essay today at Nukenomics.com. We accept the standing army. We accept the fusion centers. We accept all these things. And, I do have things I need to do at home today, so I'm just going to stay home. I can probably get my work done remotely today. I don't have to go to my office downtown, which is across the police barrier, right? I'll figure out how to do it. Well, let me suggest this. If that's your attitude, well, you'll be with the majority, okay? But let there be a small minority, and that might include you, my listener, where you say, there's a barricade down there because they're having this crisis, right? These cops are having this magnificent crisis, and they're all out there in their full armor. They are the heroes of the day. Everybody's admiring them. Everybody's thanking them. Everybody's grateful that they have abused the Constitution. They're thanking them, and they feel safe. But you know what? I've got some work to do, and I'm going to drive my car down there. And if I can't drive my car or travel in my car down there, I'm going to walk. And I've got business to do. It's private business, and I'm not worried. And I'm going to go ahead and go down there into that forbidden zone, right? The zone in the lockdown. Well, there'll be a few people who do that. And maybe you will add to their number one. You, my listener, adding to that number a few people who are going to just go about their business and not be intimidated. Adding to that number, that tiny number, one. And that might be you. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. And what I'm concerned about is that there's not that internal restraint. There's not the fear of abuse of the people. The people can be abused if we need to, right? The people can be slapped around, tased, shot down. They can have their cars seized and impounded. They can be charged criminally if it's necessary. Right. We can arrest people without individual suspicion. We can arrest people and charge them under the phony disorderly conduct statute, which has 2 of 5 provisions that are unconstitutional. We can do that if it's for public safety, right? If there's a crisis, right? If the alarm has been sounded, right? If we got the call from Washington, right? If the governor says so, right? Is that how that's going to work? That you, my listener, are just going to sit by and do nothing? Well, a tiny number of people will protest. I couldn't find in the Boston Marathon story anybody who said no. No one said no. And all these people were grateful that the cops would swarm through with their MP, their machine pistols, ready to go, their fingers on the trigger guard, going through the whole house. And they're glad. They feel relieved that, well, I can pull my shorts back up. I can go back in the house and have lunch now. They're relieved that the cops have sworn through and found that, well, here's another house that's safe. We can clear that one from our list. No warrant, and we all are safe. And the safety these people have is I would say, very temporary. And they are poorer for it. My concern is that if we don't have strong individual people like you, my listener, acting out their convictions, that we are going to be impoverished long term. We are far less rich than we could be here in Chattanooga, Henry County, and that's because this kind of thinking already is strongly rooted in our psyches, in our breasts, in our minds and hearts. David Till, listening to radio. And now we're going to find out about a terrific field, that is to say, the logistics field here in Chattanooga. David Till, listening to radio.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
The TBI is on the hunt after a non-custodial mother reportedly ran off with her daughter. 12-year-old Briella Reese Bowling is missing from her Smithville town.